Welcome into episode 11 of Awakening the Ordinary. My name is Daniel Clower, and I got some news to share with you. So last week I talked about the January 6th insurrection attempt, the fake electors scheme, and how basically that was just completely disqualifying, in my opinion. How it made it so that I could not, in good conscience, vote for Donald Trump, even though I'm a conservative. Then I talked about some of the more current event gaffes that he has had going on, including rambling about being a movie maker in Alcatraz and beautiful, strong, weak island. Also, how he failed to distinguish between Times New Roman font and a tattoo. I want to talk about some actual news items that are going on currently. So we're in for a long episode. We're doing this episode the long way. This week I'm going to be talking about Stephen Miller and some of his disturbing and frightening claims. And I'm probably going to end up ranting like a maniac about him again because I really hate that guy. I'm also going to be talking about some immigration issues that we're facing, both some ongoing cases and some new, honestly, pretty blatantly racist policies that we're implementing. Then I'm going to be talking about some Supreme Court cases, and in particular one that I think might change the entire face of our republic as we know it if it goes through. It's essentially the Trump administration's attempt to balkanize the United States. And yes, I will talk about what that word means. And then finally, at the very end, I want to talk a little bit about some news that's not making the news. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned a Zurich University study that they were conducting on Reddit that basically pitted AI against actual users and showed that AI can change people's minds at an alarming rate. And then, surprise, surprise, a few days later, mainstream media ended up picking it up. So, hey, here's one for the big guy. Instead, this week, I'm going to be talking about some investigations that are going on about the 2024 election that I think everybody should hear about. But without further ado, I want to talk about something that I think everybody can understand. A $400 million bribe. First things first, before I talk about this $400 million bribe, I want to talk about a phrase that you may have heard thrown around regarding this story, the emoluments clause. And that is a strange word that absolutely nobody uses in any circumstance other than talking about presidents getting bribes. So I want to just elucidate on it a little bit. The emoluments clause is a section of the Constitution that says that no government official is allowed to accept anything at all, basically, any kind of gift, anything that they don't pay fair market value for without the approval of Congress. And that includes any government official, including, yes, the President of the United States. Princes, kings, nations are not allowed to give gifts to government officials because it comes off as shady. It comes off as a bribe. If a country or a leader is giving you some kind of gift, there's an implicit understanding that you owe them one, basically. They're trying to curry your favor in an unfair way. And this has come up before. I mean, during the Bush administration, I remember there was an issue where I think Bush was gifted a dog. And the dog had to sit around in the White House for a while they got congressional approval on whether or not they were allowed to keep it and where it had to go. And one of the most famous examples is actually Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was gifted an elephant tusk. And an elephant tusk, honestly, does not have a ton of, crazy monetary value. It's not like it's a jet plane that you could fly around and, use for your own purposes. But he still had to go before Congress and ask if he could keep it. And Congress said no. So he had to give it to one of the U.S. departments at the time and basically put it in a museum. So the nation of Qatar is gifting President Trump a $400+ million 747 plane. And the idea is that he is going to be using it as his new Air Force One because the Air Force One that he is currently using is like 30 years old and it just ain't stylish anymore. So he wants a new one, a palace in the sky, as they're calling it. The agreement dictates that right before Trump leaves office, He is going to donate this plane to the Trump Presidential Library Foundation. So this is not a gift that they are giving to the US government to use in perpetuity. This is not a plane that presidents for the next 30 years are going to be able to use. This is a plane that they are technically gifting to the Department of Defense for President Trump to use as his Air Force One and then take when he's not the president anymore. As you might be able to tell, this has some problematic ethical implications. Just on the logical surface, Trump is kind of claiming that this is somehow going to be saving the United States some money. That's just not accurate. We have ordered 2 new 747s from Boeing to be made as new Air Force Ones. I think Trump actually ordered them in his first presidency, and they're still not made. They are delayed beyond belief. It's crazy. They're crazy expensive. And yeah, that's ludicrous. I get it. But they're still going to be made. We have still paid for them. They are still being made, and they are going to be used as the new Air Force Ones once they are released. Second of all, this plane that Qatar is giving us is not going to be fitted like Air Force One. Air Force One has a lot of special, specific security features. So it's got different communications features. It's got a bunch of different classified features. It's basically not just your regular everyday 747. So we're going to have to pay to retrofit this plane with all of the things that you need to have in an Air Force One. So we're actually still going to be spending money, even though it's a gift that they are giving us for free. We still have to spend money to get it fixed up the way it needs to be. And not only that, but it's going to take essentially the entire presidency to get this done. You can't just retrofit a 747 in a week. And especially when it comes from a dubiously friendly government like Qatar. I mean, they're going to have to take this plane apart basically piece by piece to make sure it doesn't have any bugs. It doesn't have any mics. It doesn't have any tracking features or a kill switch or like any number of horrific things that they could have implanted into this plane. And even if you completely trust Qatar and you think they would never do this, well, they work very closely with like China and other fairly unfriendly countries. So there's every possibility that one of those countries could have slipped something in. So we have to take it apart. We have to search it thoroughly. We have to make sure that it is retrofitted correctly with all the bells and whistles that you need on Air Force One. That's going to take a while. So it's almost certainly not going to be done until maybe the last year of Trump's presidency. So maybe he gets to fly around in Air Force One, the new palace in the sky, for like a year, maybe. And then before he leaves office, he's donating it to his own foundation. He has said that he is not going to be using this for his own private use. And that's basically the whole argument for why it's okay. It doesn't break the emoluments clause because they're not technically giving it to him. They're giving it to the DOD, who is then going to give it to him later, but he's not going to use it. Trust me. He's going to just leave it sitting in a museum to look at. Something tells me that he's not going to just put a brand new, completely retrofitted, fancy schmancy plane in a museum and just look at it. But who knows? I mean, this is Trump we're talking about. He's a very honest and upstanding guy. He tells the truth all the time. Honest Abe. I mean, Trump, right? The other thing that you need to keep in mind is that this is not just like leftists or people with Trump derangement syndrome or whatever getting worked up about this. This is a serious issue that, first of all, half of Congress is getting worked up about, including like fairly conservative Congress members. Because, frankly, it's completely bald-faced and not even trying to hide being a bribe. And second of all, even like ardent Trump supporters like Ben Shapiro, Laura Loomer are calling this for what it is. I mean, it's ridiculous. Accepting a $400 million plus plane and pretending like it's no big deal because who wouldn't accept it? Like, I'd be an idiot not to take this. It just doesn't pass the sniff test. I think anybody can look on its face and see that this is corruption. This is blatant corruption. There's a reason we have the emoluments clause. There's a reason you're not supposed to just accept gifts from foreign countries. You'll feel indebted to them in some way. Who knows if Qatar is asking for anything in return for this plane? They might be in secret. They might wait and ask for something later. They might hang it over his head as a bargaining chip. He's not just getting this $400 million plane himself. His children are going to Qatar in the coming weeks. They're going to be making these extraordinarily lucrative real estate deals, like millions and billions of dollars of real estate deals. And if you're telling me that that's completely unrelated, and he's visiting this week and meeting with all the leadership there, and then next week his family is just so happens to be meeting them too, then I got a bridge in the middle of Nebraska to sell you. But why is he even being allowed to do this? I mean, shouldn't somebody be stepping up and calling him out for this, holding him accountable? Well, yes. But the problem is the person that is supposed to be holding him accountable for these sort of things is the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. The problem is Pam Bondi was also a lobbyist for Qatar. And at one point she was raking in like $115,000 a month to be their PR buddy. So Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, used to be a lobbyist for Qatar. Kash Patel, the leader of the FBI, the strong arm of the DOJ, also used to be a lobbyist for Qatar. So really, basically, the whole way down, it's corruption and people receiving gifts from this dubiously friendly foreign country that, by the way, are not nice guys. I mean, they come under fire for human rights issues constantly. You guys remember in 2022, they were hosting the World Cup. That's actually, I think, when Pam Bondi was advocating for them because they were using slave labor and people were dying all the time building the facilities there. So they needed some PR from a friendly neighborhood Pam Bondi. And honestly, I am sorely tempted to make a video about a lot of these Trump cabinet officials like Pam Bondi and RFK and all the juicy skeletons in their closet, because honestly, it really is like textbook evil villain stuff. It's ludicrous that we are living in this oligarchy right now. Okay, speaking of oligarchy, speaking of corruption and bribery, there is another bribery emoluments clause kind of issue that's going on that is not getting the same amount of press. And I think it's because it's a little harder to understand than just boom, $400 million plane in your face. I think this is the worst issue between the two because this is a lot more untraceable. It's a lot more of a long-term issue. He can make significantly more money on this than just $400 million. And that's his crypto coin. Just a very quick general overview. There are basically two types of cryptocurrencies. There is what you call a stable coin, which is something like Bitcoin. And that is considered stable because they are a finite resource. So you can't just make more of them. They're based on a specific blockchain and you won't be able to just add in more of them at will. There's only a certain number. There will only ever be a certain number. And so they are considered more stable in their value. They'll hold value for longer because you can't just dump a whole load of them into the market from out of literally nowhere. And then there is another type of cryptocurrency, which is called a meme coin, aka a shit coin. And pardon my French, but that is actually what it's called. These meme coins are not stable at all. The issue with the meme coins is basically whoever is in control of the coin can just make them, essentially. They can just kind of turn on a faucet and a bunch of coins just come out of thin air. So they have no real actual intrinsic value in the same way that a stable coin does. They're basically just for fun. It's like collecting stickers or something like that. Trump coin is a meme coin. Trump coin was launched on January 17th, 3 days before Donald Trump was inaugurated as president, and he could theoretically own any amount of Trump coin, and he could basically give himself any amount of Trump coin theoretically. Part of the draw of cryptocurrency is the fact that it is, generally speaking, untraceable. You can't necessarily know who is giving how much to who unless they want you to. You can have a private unlisted wallet that doesn't have your name associated with it at all. So that's why a lot of people like using Bitcoin to order illegal things online because it's untraceable and you don't know who is buying and you don't know who's selling and you don't know how much you have and how much they have. It's completely anonymized. The thing about Trump coin is that because the Trump family owns it, they actually get a cut every time any kind of transaction is made using Trump coin. They get money off of that. And that includes anytime anybody uses Trump coin to buy or sell anything, anytime anybody buys more Trump coin to just have them in their wallet, the Trump family gets a cut of that. So obviously on its face, that's pretty bad because it means that essentially anybody or any government or any company, any entity at all could decide that they want to anonymously give Trump a bunch of money by buying a bunch of Trump coin. And there would be no way to track it. We wouldn't know if China is buying a bunch of Trump coin to give to Trump to make it so that he caves on a trade deal, for example. But it gets worse because in April of this year, he announced that the top 220 owners of Trump coin would be allowed to have a private dinner with him. So obviously that means that anybody who wants to pull the ear of the president can pay a lot of money to the president to get Trump coin and then go talk to him about policy stuff. That is blatant and outright bribery. And not only that, but he also offered the top 25 owners of Trump coin a private tour in the White House. So you can pay a bunch of money, who knows how much, millions and millions of dollars, get a bunch of Trump coin, and then go sit with Donald Trump in the Oval Office and shoot the breeze about policy? This is ludicrous. This is so blatantly unfair, unconstitutional. Frankly, if any president in the past had ever tried this, they would have been impeached immediately. This is a big deal. I think it's an even bigger deal than the Qatar plane. But because it's crypto and because people don't really understand crypto, I mean, I don't even really in depth understand crypto. They just kind of brush it off. But you don't have to be an expert in crypto to understand that Trump gifting private meals to people who pay money, it's not okay. It is almost the definition of an oligarchy. Getting gifted a $400 million plane and raking it in on a crypto scam, all while telling parents that maybe their kids don't need 30 dolls, maybe they can just have 3. And by the way, they'll be more expensive, isn't enough for you. He's also trying to screw over the middle class in another way. This new big, beautiful budget bill is filled with cuts to Medicaid and Medicare. And yes, I know what you're thinking. He promised it would never happen. I really hate to break it to you, but Donald Trump lied. I know. Hold the shock. It's true. He lied. Can you believe it? He actually is totally fine with having Medicare and Medicaid cut. See, the GOP is trying to hide the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid because it is deeply unpopular and they promised they would not do it. So they're trying to hide it. They're trying to bury it deep within the bill. And they're not outright saying, yeah, we're going to be cutting $800 billion from Medicare and Medicaid. What they're doing is this. They are trying to pass a bill that calls for $880 billion to be cut from the Energy and Commerce Committee. On its face, that sounds fine. Energy and commerce, that could be anything, right? Well, not exactly. The GOP is trying to hide the fact that they are cutting Medicare and Medicaid. And It's seemingly working based on the comments that I am receiving where people are saying, no, the GOP said they would never cut it and they're not going to cut it. And there's no direct cuts to Medicare or Medicaid. And I get it. I get why people are falling for it. Government is labyrinthine. It's confusing. The way that budgets are allocated is weird. But I want to break it down for you really, really simply. This bill calls for $880 billion in cuts to the Energy and Commerce Committee over the next 10 years. Republicans are saying, see, we're not cutting from Medicaid specifically. Medicaid isn't even in the bill. The word does not appear in the entire bill. So we're not cutting from Medicaid, you liars. But here's the thing. It doesn't need to appear in the bill directly for them to be cutting from it. If the Energy and Commerce Committee cut out literally every single thing in the budget, except for Medicare and Medicaid, there would still be about $660 billion that they needed to cut. So they are asking the Energy and Commerce Committee to cut an amount from their budget that is literally not possible to cut without cutting from Medicare or Medicaid or both. So it's essentially like they're saying, hey, here's a carton of eggs. You need to make an omelet. And then they're like, whoa, I never said you had to break any eggs. Okay, that's not even in my instructions at all. I just said make an omelet. You're making that whole breaking the eggs thing up. But the fact is, we are bound by the laws of mathematics. And if there is not enough money to cut from this committee without touching Medicare and Medicaid, they are saying you have to cut from Medicare and Medicaid. But that's not the only promise that Trump is breaking with this big, beautiful bill that he has so ardently stood for. He also promised that there would be no taxes on tips and there would be no taxes on overtime. Two things that should theoretically help out the working class a lot. That's not in the bill. That's not in the bill at all. They are not doing anything related to cutting taxes on tips or cutting taxes on overtime. They just completely forgot about it. And they're hoping you forget about it too. Instead, this bill is focusing more on capping out the maximum tax bracket at 37%. So that's essentially just making sure that the absolute richest in the country don't have to pay more. And I want to take a quick aside. I feel like when I talk about taxing the rich, when people talk about taxing the rich, a lot of people think, oh, well, I'm pretty well off. I'm making, what, a couple $100,000 a year. Another raise or two, and that might be me. No, if you are watching this video, that is not you. Because the highest tax bracket is for people making over $626,000 a year. And it's higher if you're married filing jointly. But if you're a single person and you're making $626,000 a year, you're not reaching that bracket. You have to be making more than that to be taxed at the highest percent. Just as a quick kind of reminder, we have a progressive tax bracket system. So it's not like if you suddenly are making $627,000 a year, everything is being taxed at that highest 37% tax bracket. No, everything gets taxed in the bracket that you have earned it up to. So the only amount that would be taxed at that 37% highest amount is that $1,000 over $626,000 that you made. So even if you're making $700,000 a year, you're not going to be hitting 37% tax on $700,000. You're going to be paying 37% on $74,000. So this is not something that is going to affect the everyman. It's not going to affect anybody in the middle class. It's not going to affect most people in the upper class. It's going to affect the ultra wealthy. The ultra wealthy. So we're talking about billionaires. We're talking about people like Trump and his friends. So if you're saying that you don't want taxes to be raised on the rich, then you are basically a class traitor. There's not really any other way of putting it. I mean, if you have a problem with, for example, paying for food stamps with your taxes because you feel like those people are freeloaders. I just want to remind you, Walmart is the largest employer in the United States. And Walmart is also the largest employer of people who need to be on food stamps because they're not making enough money. So if you have a problem with social programs and like paying taxes for food stamps and whatever, you should have a huge problem with giving tax breaks to billionaires, because instead of just paying a little bit for food stamps for somebody who really needs it, you're putting more money in Sam Walton's pocket of the Walmart Waltons. So that was just a quick aside. I don't want people to get it twisted. When we talk about the highest tax brackets, we're not talking about people like you and me. We are talking about exorbitantly and disgustingly wealthy people who can absolutely afford to pay higher taxes. And again, they're not paying higher taxes on everything. They're paying higher taxes on everything over $626,000, which I think any of us could agree is certainly enough to live on in a year. But there is some intriguing news here because the GOP has actually rejected this new budget. Is it because Trump promised to not put taxes on tips and overtimes and he's not doing that? No, unfortunately. Is it because they're afraid of backlash on cutting from Medicare and Medicaid? Maybe, but they're also saying they're not doing it, even though they clearly are. So I don't know. Really, the reason that they're pushing back on it is because it's not fiscally responsible. And I find that kind of amusing because you've got Trump running the whole Doge department, just absolutely hacking away at the federal government, all in the name of efficiency and fiscal responsibility. But at the same time, he wants to pass this budget that will add literally trillions of dollars to our deficit. And some Republicans aren't okay with that because Republicans used to be the party that talked about fiscal responsibility. Republicans used to be the party that threw a huge fit anytime the debt ceiling was raised. Nowadays, most Republicans have turned into MAGA bootlickers, and they're willing to do whatever Trump wants, but some Republicans are holding firm, and they're standing by their ideals. And I may not agree with them on everything, but I respect the fact that they are not rolling over for Trump. While Trump is throwing himself a $45 million military parade for his birthday and trying to add trillions of dollars to our national deficit, some breaking news came out just before I recorded this on Friday that our international credit rating has actually been lowered. Every single country has a credit rating. It's kind of almost like your own personal credit score. It's basically how enticing it is to loan money to a particular country. And in the past, the US has had the highest possible rating because we are incredibly wealthy. It's like we had an 800 credit score, basically. Our international credit rating has now been downgraded. And I'm going to quote here because, quote, successive U.S. administrations and Congress have failed to agree on measures to reverse the trend of large annual fiscal deficits and growing interest costs. One of the biggest issues that Trump and Republicans in general have slammed Democrats for is the fact that they didn't do much to address the deficit. And now you've got Trump wanting to give massive tax breaks to his rich friends and put the country trillions of dollars more in debt. That's not going to fix things. And unfortunately, the international community has recognized that this makes us a more risky lendee. So our credit score has gone down, and that's going to make interest rates drive up, and that's going to give us even more economic uncertainty. And that is, frankly, the absolute last thing that we need right now. Okay, so all of that kind of brings me back to the very strange and tone-deaf comments that Trump was making about dolls. He was saying that how instead of 30 or 40 dolls 11-year-old girls could make do with just 2 or 3. And yeah, they might be a little more expensive, but that would be fine. And how kids didn't need like 250 pencils, they could do with just 25. It was weird. It was odd. It was tone deaf. And frankly, even for Trump, it was kind of, I don't know, politically incompetent. You really, as the president, don't ever want to be getting on camera and telling people, yeah, you could do with less. Especially when you're, in the midst of getting a $400 million plane and raking it in from a crypto scam. But why was he saying that? I talked about this previously, how we were going to be seeing the effect of tariffs soon. Hold tight, because I know some of you are going to be commenting, oh, we just came to a deal with China. And yeah, okay, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But for now, we have actually started to officially see the effects of the tariffs. This week, for the first time since COVID, we had shipping containers showing up empty. Completely empty. And this means that you are going to see shortages in stock at your local stores. It means that truck drivers are going to be sitting around having absolutely nothing to do. It means that dock workers are going to be sitting around having absolutely nothing to do. And all of this is going to be bad for the economy. Not only is it going to be just kind of generally vaguely bad for the economy, but we're probably going to be in an official recession very soon because of it. So, what is an official recession? The actual definition of a recession is when the GDP contracts for 2 fiscal quarters in a row. Our GDP already contracted in the first fiscal quarter of this year, and that was in large part due to the fears of tariffs and what they were going to be doing. Now that the tariffs have actually somewhat started to take effect, in my opinion, it is almost guaranteed that our GDP is going to contract again in this fiscal quarter. And if and when it does, in fact, become an official recession, and it has to be labeled as an official recession, and you have economists going on news channels talking about how we are in a recession, and you have reporters asking the president, hey, when do you think we're going to be out of this recession? That's going to have a huge effect on our economy. The R word is frightening for any business, anybody with a job, anybody in America should be terrified of the R word, recession. We saw the effects that it had back in COVID. We saw the effects that it had back during the housing crisis. It was bleak. It was bad. And I'm not saying it's necessarily going to get to that level again, but this is entirely man-made. It's purely through the decisions of one man that we are going to be going through this recession. Trump never had to do any of this. He never had to create these quote-unquote reciprocal tariffs that were not at all reciprocal. He never had to get us into a trade war that we have given up on and lost. It was entirely due to his own ego that people are going to be losing their jobs, losing their livelihoods, losing their homes. It was preventable. At least with COVID, it was like an act of God. It was some horrible pandemic. We really couldn't have truly seen it coming. And yeah, maybe the response wasn't the best, but that was something that happened to us. And instead, we are making this happen to ourselves for literally zero reason. Is President Trump going to take credit for this recession that will inevitably hit us and, crash the stock market and crash our job market? No, probably not. I mean, he took credit for the stock market rising when he won the election, but hadn't yet been inaugurated. He said that was the Trump market. Sleepy Joe had nothing to do with it. People were just riling up the market because they knew Trump was coming back to town. And then, of course, later, when the stock market absolutely crashed because of these horrifically incompetent tariffs, he literally said out loud that the bad parts of the economy are Biden's fault and the good parts of the economy are Trump's fault. What? That doesn't even make any sense. But that's what he said. And I am assuming when this recession hits, that's what he's going to continue to say. Even though it makes absolutely no sense and you can draw a literal direct straight line between the tariffs and the recession, he's not going to take credit for it. So I just hope, dear listener, that you do not fall for the incredibly obvious lie that he will be telling you when this recession hits. I mentioned that there was a trade deal made with China and actually with the UK as well. I want to talk about that a little bit too, because I know the Trump team is claiming that this is a wonderful, amazing deal, art of the deal, master negotiator. Look at him work. Mwah! Give that little butt a kiss. But it's an absolute nothing burger. Seriously, China essentially gave up nothing. I mean, nothing. They have said that they will get rid of some non-tariff barriers, but they have given absolutely no details on exactly what or exactly when. They gave no time frame for it. And just a quick reminder that back in 2020, Trump announced this amazing, masterful negotiated deal with China where they were going to be buying $200 billion of goods from the US. And you know how much they bought? Nada, nothing. They didn't follow through on the deal because there was no actual limits in place. There was no timetable. There was no rules in place on how it had to be implemented. And we're at the same place with this deal too. So we have gotten rid of our insane, massive 145% tariffs, and we're down to 30% tariffs now on Chinese goods. China has gotten rid of their reciprocal tariffs on us. They're down to 10% tariffs on our goods. This is a pause that is put in place for 90 days. So we are going to see if we keep it. Who knows? Trump is not exactly known for being predictable, so maybe we'll keep it, maybe we won't. There's genuinely no way of knowing. But the fact is that Trump got us into a horrible economic state with these ridiculous tariffs that were completely not thought out whatsoever. And then with China having to do absolutely nothing but sit there, we have now come crawling back and said sorry and gotten rid of them. We did nothing. And he's parading around like he did something great. He set the house on fire and then he put it out. And now he's talking about how he's the greatest fireman ever. He's the best negotiator. Nobody could ever come to this deal, baby. It's embarrassing. It is genuinely embarrassing if you are falling for this rhetoric where Trump got us into a horrific mess and then put us back to where we were before the mess started and called it a victory. It's embarrassing. Speaking of which, the UK deal is essentially also a huge nothing, a nothing burger. Remember, this whole tariff situation was supposed to be about trade deficits for some reason. I mean, nobody really knows why he decided that trade deficits were the thing that we needed to conquer with tariffs, but that's what it was supposed to be about. So even though we actually had a trade surplus with the UK, meaning we were selling to them more than they were buying from us, Trump thought this isn't good enough, and they're going to be hit with the 10% tariff that we're putting on basically everybody. So we came to a kind of agreement with the UK where basically the UK is cutting their tariffs on us, meaning that they're cutting taxes for their people. Their people don't have to pay anymore. But we're still paying tariffs. We're still paying that 10% tariff. That didn't change at all, except we're cutting tariffs on the first 100,000 luxury cars that are imported from the UK. So yes, congratulations. You are a champion of the middle class. If anybody wants to buy a Jaguar, they will be able to duty free, baby. Everything else in the agreement is basically just that we will talk more about trade. We intend to set each other up as favored nations. We intend to set up different trade deals and yada, yada, yada. Same kind of thing with China. We intend to talk more about how we can come to some kind of a deal. Okay, congratulations. again, this trade deal, the point is that this is not some amazing, awesome victory. This is not some huge win for Trump, the master negotiator. He made a huge problem. He kind of fixed the problem, and now he's claiming victory. You have to keep in mind there are still long-term consequences. Like, for example, the empty ships that have arrived to the United States at this point. Like that, you can't undo that. It already happened. People have already lost jobs because of this. Businesses have already closed because of this. Not to mention, other countries have already started seeking other trade partners because they have seen that we are not trustworthy. We are an uncertain partner right now. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know what Trump is going to decide with tariffs unilaterally. They never had to worry about that before because it was always in the hands of Congress. Congress had to vote on tariffs. Congress had to vote on whether or not we would engage in trade wars, but not anymore. Now we got art of the deal doing it, baby. Just keep in mind, please do not fall for the ridiculous rhetoric that Trump is some master negotiator, because this is really embarrassing stuff. I constantly heard complaints that we were a laughingstock under Joe Biden globally, that all the other countries were laughing at us. Well, they're laughing now because we pooped our own pants and then we changed them and we talked about how great we were for it. In a stunning turn of events, President Trump wrote Executive Order 14087, lowering prescription drug costs for Americans. It orders Health and Human Services to look into new healthcare payment and delivery models that would lower drug costs and promote access to innovative drug therapies for beneficiaries enrolled in the Medicare and Medicaid programs. That, along with the Inflation Reduction Act, has already led to radically reduced drug prices that will take effect in 2026, including capping costs on staples like insulin. Psych! That's the wrong number! No. Actually, that was a Biden-era executive order that Trump completely did away with on his first day in office, baby. No, instead, he labeled that unpopular, inflationary, illegal, or radical. But he realized that people absolutely hate having to pay incredibly high costs for prescriptions. So he tried to do that, but much worse. No. He released Executive Order 14297, delivering most favored nation prescription drug pricing to American patients. It essentially says that we are going to ask pharmaceutical companies to please just charge us less. Just please charge us what you charge the least charging that you do. Please. And then if they don't, you better watch your back, because we are going to, in 90 days, have a talk about ways that we can try and make you do it. Please. I mean, this is the most feckless, sad attempt at reducing pharmaceutical prices I have ever seen. This executive order has zero weight behind it. There is no way that they can legally force these pharmacies to just charge us whatever they charge the nation that they charge the least for prices, which is what Donald Trump said. He said it was going to cut costs by 30 to 90% immediately, which is just no, it didn't. Go pick up your prescription. It's not cheaper. It used to be that Republicans thought that things like tariffs and price control were like communism. You don't do that stuff, okay? It's un-American. And now Republicans are realizing, well, you know what? The orange guy just gets to do whatever he wants. So we're not going to complain about it. We're going to talk about it like it's the best, greatest thing that's ever happened. And whether or not it actually works, we're going to take credit for it. Is it good that he is asking these pharmaceutical companies to lower prices for Americans? Yes, of course. It is good that he is trying to do that. Is it good that he is going up on stage and telling people that it is immediately going to reduce costs by 30 to 90%? No. Is it good that he undid Biden's executive order that was already working to reduce costs on prescriptions? No. We have a serious issue with big pharma in the United States. The way to fix it is not saying, please, please, God, please, just charge us less money. No, you need to get rid of lobbyists. You need to enact campaign finance reform so you don't get big pharma paying these Congress members to enact laws that favor them constantly. You need to open up single payer healthcare systems so that the country as a whole can negotiate prices for drugs. But regardless, I do actually want to take some time to talk about some things that Trump has done that I do agree with in the past week or so. Because genuinely, he has done some good things. And I don't just want to be bashing on the guy, even though most of the time he's doing really dumb and horrific and evil things and deserves bashing on. So first of all, he in this little like tour of the Middle East that he's doing to like rub elbows with princes and kings and stuff and get $400 million jets, he also has announced that we are getting rid of the sanctions on Syria. And I actually think that's wonderful. Genuinely, I think that's fantastic. Syria, and I know this is not a foreign policy podcast. We won't be going into huge detail, but basically, Syria was run by terrorists, and they got deposed. They got deposed actually in the latter part of Biden's presidency, and I was really hoping that Biden would get rid of the sanctions that we had on Syria. I think he should have, because now there's a new regime in charge. And if they want any shot of being a genuine, legitimate country that has a spot in the world stage, they cannot be suffering under the weight of sanctions that their forebears earned. They had nothing to do with the things that we sanctioned them for. So I think it's really fantastic that we have gotten rid of these sanctions. I'm really glad that we have. I think it genuinely gives Syria a shot. I think it sort of elevates them from just this country that's doomed to constant warfare and warlords and terrorist cells, and it gives them a shot to become a real legitimate country, a legitimate democracy. And I don't mean that in like a denigrating way. I'm not talking down on Syrians themselves, but the country has had serious problems before and was never a legitimate rule. Now they have that shot. So I am genuinely glad that President Trump has gotten rid of those sanctions. I wish Biden did it sooner. The other thing is that he's sort of like flirting with the idea of barring congressional trading somehow. I know Republicans have, rightfully so, absolutely slammed the likes of Nancy Pelosi, for example, for enriching themselves tremendously by doing essentially insider trading. I mean, they know what laws are going to be enacted before they're enacted. They know the ebbs and flows of the political weather before regular people do. And it's not right that they get to enrich themselves so tremendously through stock market trading. I mean, these Congress members are making like $100,000 a year. And on a salary like that, somebody like Nancy Pelosi is worth now like tens and like 50s of millions of dollars. That doesn't happen naturally. That doesn't happen because of book deals. That happens through insider trading, and it's bad. And nowadays, of course, you have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Pam Bondi doing the exact same thing. So I really hope that Trump does follow through with this talk that he has made about barring insider trading by government officials. That can only be good for the American people. Unfortunately, that is the end of the segment talking about the things that Trump has done that are not horrible. We now bring you back to your regularly scheduled programming. I want to talk now about some immigration stuff that's been going on. There's actually kind of a lot. I'm going to try and keep it brief, keep it to this one segment because At times, it feels like this podcast has become like an immigration podcast. That's not what it's all about. That's just what's been in the news so much lately. So I'll keep it brief here. First of all, Judge Dugan, she's the Wisconsin judge that I talked about a few episodes ago. She was basically taken away in handcuffs from the court because she essentially led somebody who was here illegally out of a side door and told ICE agents they couldn't arrest them in the courtroom. They arrested her. They dragged her away in chains. They have now indicted her on charges. And legal experts think it's extraordinarily unlikely that she actually is found guilty on these charges. I agree. I do have some concerns, though, that when the Trump administration does lose, inevitably, they're essentially going to just blame political activist judges. So I want to call that out now before they get the chance. This is not some activist judge that Judge Dugan is going to be going in front of. It's not somebody who has something against the Trump administration. Legal experts across the board agree this is a weak case and she is not going to be found guilty. So when that happens, I hope you can drown out the noise about all those activist judges, those Democrats trying to use lawfare, and just understand that whatever they're accusing the other side of doing is almost always what they are guilty of. So just keep that in mind. It's a developing story. We'll see how it goes. The next thing I want to talk about is some more intimidation tactics that the Trump administration is unfortunately doing. The mayor of Newark was arrested at a detention facility just a few days ago. Mayor Ras Baraka was at a new detention facility in Newark with two congressional representatives. The congressional representatives were there to inspect the detention center, as is their duty. They're supposed to do that. And he was tagging along because it's in his town. He's the mayor. He wanted to go in with them, and they said no. But they did allow him to stand kind of within the fence, but outside of the facility itself. He stood there waiting for them, just kind of standing around, and eventually they told him to leave. I think he put up some kind of verbal protest, just saying like, no, like, what do I have to leave for? I'm just standing here. They told him to leave again. He left. There was no like tussle. There was no fight. He just walked out. So then he was just waiting with all the other protesters outside of the facility, and somebody came up to him and said, hey, they're making some calls. I think they're going to come out and arrest you. And he waited. He didn't try and flee. And ICE agents came out and arrested him. Now, he did say that the agents who arrested him were very polite and proper. They weren't a problem exactly. It was just a problem that he was being arrested for simply being there, basically. And obviously, when the crowd and the congressional members saw the mayor was being arrested and taken away, well, yeah, that caused a big hubbub. This is yet another example of the Trump administration using intimidation tactics to basically try and show that they have the power. They have the guns. They have the handcuffs. And if you don't agree with what they're doing, they have absolutely no qualms with arresting you on trumped up charges. And it doesn't matter if you are going to be found not guilty. They're going to put you through the legal process because they can. So even though the judge who saw Mayor Baraka insisted that they would be able to just, deal with everything right there, they could just come with a summary ruling. The mayor said, no, I want a trial in front of a jury of my peers, as is my right, which good for him. I think we all need to stand up to tyranny in any form when we see it. My concern with this is that the Trump administration is going to keep pushing the envelope because we have already seen how they send plainclothes ICE agents out to arrest people, wearing masks, not identifying themselves. And we've seen this where in front of a crowd of protesters, they arrest a political activist and leader for absolutely zero reason. I can't help but think they are kind of inviting trouble. I hate to say it, but I think they want something bad to happen because that's going to be the fuse that lights their argument for doing something like implementing martial law. That's going to be what they can stand behind when they say that they need to arm their ICE agents like the military and send them in, full body armor and tanks to go get people. They are completely abusing their power and being tyrannical in an open and frightening way. And they are trying to silence dissent simply by being scary, by showing their power and flexing their muscles. This is a problem not just for Americans who are concerned about the mistreatment of people who are not here legally. This should be a concern to all Americans who don't want to live under tyranny. And I guess kind of somewhat related just to this whole immigration issue, there are now reports coming out that there are other people like Kilmar Abrego Garcia who were sent to CCOT who either had withholding of removal orders, so they were not supposed to be sent to El Salvador, or some of them actually had been granted asylum or were in the process of being granted asylum, and so they weren't supposed to be deported either. So there's a lot more of these little mistakes coming out that are showing that these people cannot be trusted. And this is the entire reason why we have due process to begin with. This should show you exactly why it's important. Because they have said when they send somebody on accident, their hands are tied and they have no power to get them back. So at that point, the answer is you have to make sure that you never, ever send somebody on accident. That's the only solution. So speaking of not sending people on accident, making sure you give them due process, the Supreme Court actually came out with another ruling. I mentioned how they came out with that midnight order telling the United States to just stop it, get some help. Don't use the Alien Enemies Act to deport people right now because we think you're abusing it. Well, they came out with a more full decision. Last time they said, don't use it until we get back to you because we need to look into what's going on. Now they have said, don't use it at all for now. Like you're donezo. You are abusing the power. You are abusing the Alien Enemies Act. You are not giving people a fair amount of time to plead their case like we told you you needed to do. 24 hours is not good enough. And so we are telling you to stop using the Alien Enemies Act for now. We are sending it back to the lower courts to come up with an official ruling. And if you want to appeal it from there, appeal it and it'll come back to the Supreme Court and they'll have to make a final ruling. So at the end of the day, it's still kind of in flux. The Supreme Court has said you are abusing your power and you need to stop. But we don't have a fully finalized ruling on the table from the Supreme Court yet. So we'll just have to kind of hold on for more information, basically. This next issue I want to talk about is one that I'm frankly kind of embarrassed of. So I'm going to raise my hands and, give my own mea culpa. In the past, I have said that racism is a problem amongst individuals, but by and large, systemic racism has been eradicated out of the US government. It's been legislated away. It's not something we really, by and large, need to worry about, with obvious fringe cases, of course. And I was wrong. I thought as a country we had moved past this, and unfortunately, the Trump administration has brought racism back into style. Throughout the first 100 days, the Trump administration has essentially been getting rid of temporary protections on refugees from all over the world that are here in the United States. So from war-torn countries, from countries undergoing civil war or human rights abuses. I mean, there was a big story about taking away the protection orders on, for example, like thousands of Afghan refugees. And in particular, they are in danger because when you are from Afghanistan and you have come and worked with the federal government in any way, that's kind of a death sentence. They're being sent back to Afghanistan and they are genuinely in severe danger. Well, there is one group of refugees that this administration has decided to welcome with open arms. And that is white South African farmers. They are saying that there is a genocide against white South African farmers. I have heard of horror stories related to bad, terrible things happening to white South African farmers. But upon doing further research, this is not some endemic genocide going on. I looked up a lot of the crime statistics in South Africa, and essentially, like for example, this past year, there were 50 murders of white South African farmers in the country. And there were like 20,000 murders in general. So it's not like they are being attacked at a much higher rate than any other group. It's just a very crime-ridden country. Unfortunately, South Africa has a lot of problems, and a lot of people are in some level of danger there just because there's a lot of violence. But white South African farmers are not in any sort of special danger that is unique to them. They are in the same amount of danger as anybody else there. But unfortunately, this administration has taken up this conspiracy theory about white genocide. White genocide is a term that even 10 years ago, you never would have heard on anywhere other than like racist online forums like Stormfront. But nowadays, unfortunately, this administration is embracing it as fact. And that's regardless of the actual facts. You can look up the crime statistics. You can look up exactly what's going on in the country. The country itself, the government of South Africa has said this is not happening. This is an insult to us that you are calling it a genocide. But unfortunately, it seems like a lot of Trump's biggest donors may have gotten in his ear because people like Elon Musk, who is a white South African man, Peter Thiel, have always been advocating the idea of white genocide in South Africa. And in fact, there was actually a pretty embarrassing flub where somebody, who knows who, was editing the programming for Grok, the AI chatbot on Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, and told it that it needed to talk about white genocide in South Africa as if it was real and happening, regardless of what it found online in its research. Which, I mean, okay, that's kind of proof right there. But then, because they flubbed it, they made it accidentally just start talking about South African white genocide in like completely unrelated questions. So somebody would ask something about like, this upcoming movie, or like, what year did this happen? And it would answer the question and then start talking about white genocide, which, I mean, I'm laughing about it. It's not really funny. It's honestly kind of disgusting. These people are using their position of power to be racist, to allow white refugees and turn away brown and black refugees. It just doesn't make any sense. There is no world in which you can logically argue that these Afghanis are at less of a risk than these white South Africans. It's just not possible. So if this administration was all about just helping people, as Trump is claiming, he says he just wants to be a good guy and it doesn't matter the color of their skin, he would help them anyway, then that would be one thing. But if that was the case, we wouldn't be deporting a bunch of refugees from other countries. So yes, unfortunately, this is the sign. If you thought that systemic racism was done in this country, you were wrong. I was wrong. And there were warning signs about this before. I mean, their whole talking about DEI as a racist dog whistle, it got out of hand, completely out of hand. I talked about DEI a little bit on this channel and kind of the ways in which it could be racist and the ways in which it really wasn't. And I remember in particular, a story happened early on in the presidency that caught my eye. It was where the government website that was talking about Medal of Honor recipients, the link to General Charles Calvin Rogers, who was a black man, got removed. It got turned into a dead link, and the link was replaced. The URL was changed to say DEI Medal of Honor, which I found deeply, deeply insulting, and I think any veteran should. They changed it later. There was a huge outcry. But these types of warning signs, I think this was something that we should have seen coming. And so, again, I just want to hold up my hands and say I was wrong. And I hope if you were in the same boat as I was, you can do the same. Silence on this type of thing is consent. It's advocacy. It's saying you support it. And that's not something any of us should do. Okay. Quick rewind back to the Supreme Court, because there's just a couple of other cases I want to talk about real quick. One of them is just stupid beyond belief and frustrating. And one of them is genuinely frightening and could change the face of our country forever. All right, so this first one, I'm going to kind of keep it brief because we still don't know exactly how the Supreme Court is going to rule on this. And it's possible that they make a ruling, but they kind of couch it with some language that sort of protects it. But okay, regardless, there's an issue in Alabama where an elementary school had a book called Pride Puppy in their library. Pride Puppy is a book about a puppy that gets lost in a gay pride parade. And basically you go through the book and it has different things that start with a different letter of the alphabet. It kind of walks through the alphabet and teaches the alphabet. There's nothing like obscene or like pornographic or anything like that in the book. It's just set in a gay pride parade. Parents are suing because they think that they should be able to opt out of any kind of lesson that involves anything that goes against their religious beliefs in any way. So the issue with that is, and I just want to be frank here, like, I'm not a huge fan of culture war stuff. I'm not big into identity politics. I honestly don't even really see the point of having like a gay pride parade book for kids. I don't get it. So I'm not saying I'm personally advocating for this book or anything like that. But the problem is, if parents are allowed to opt out of any kind of learning that contradicts their beliefs in any way whatsoever, first of all, you as a teacher would never be able to make a lesson plan because it's possible that virtually anything could go against some parents' belief in some way. Like, for example, if you are like really Orthodox Islam and you want to teach about any famous woman who has done anything, then you could basically theoretically opt out of that because women aren't supposed to leave the house or have leadership positions. Or the other issue is that it also just kind of helps to further indoctrinate kids. I don't think anybody wants that. You don't want to indoctrinate children, even if you strongly believe in your religion. I think you should want your kids to have access to a variety of viewpoints. You should want them to be able to see the world as it is. It's not good to shelter your kids in that kind of way. It's dangerous. It's the same reason why I disagree with like trying to ban sex ed for young kids, for example. It's important that they have some idea of what's going on, because if they don't, then they won't know if, for example, something really bad is happening to them. They wouldn't know that they need to talk about it with somebody. So if you opt your kid out of anything that you personally disagree with your own worldview, then that means that you are indoctrinating your kid into your own worldview. They never even have a shot to be their own person. But I think it's a seriously dangerous precedent to set. And this is just another perfect example of why, like, I don't even know if I'm truly conservative anymore, because conservatives have taken it so far. They're so extremist now. I'm somebody who is generally uncomfortable with the idea of gay pride imagery in a children's book. Okay, fine. But I'm not saying you need to like ban it from libraries and you need to let me opt out of any kind of children's lesson or anything that even mentions somebody who might be gay. I just think that's ludicrous. I think that's anti-intellectual. I think it's bad for children. So that's all I'm going to say on that case until we get some kind of ruling on it. But it's just something to keep an eye out for because it could have serious consequences. The next thing I want to talk about is even more serious, and it's the possible Balkanization of the United States. So, first of all, what the heck does Balkanization mean? It's basically how in Europe, You have the Balkan countries. They were a series of countries that got split apart and split into smaller individual countries. So the Balkanization of the United States is essentially taking the United States from one big country and separating us into 50 small individual countries. And I'm not even really being like hyperbolic here. If this ruling goes the wrong way, that's what could happen. Because this case is about birthright citizenship. On day one, President Trump wrote an executive order trying to end birthright citizenship. And this is another issue where you have to have some nuance because, honestly, personally speaking, I'm not even a huge fan of birthright citizenship, okay? Birthright citizenship means that if you are born on United States soil, you are a citizen. Point blank, that's it. Doesn't matter who your parents are. Doesn't matter if they were, here legally or not. If you were born on United States soil, you are a citizen. The United States is fairly unique in that aspect. Most countries do not have birthright citizenship in the same way that we do. Most countries have some kind of requirements of, one of the parents being a citizen or at least having been in the country for some certain amount of time or something along those lines. We don't. We just say if you're born here, you're a citizen. But that's what's written in the Constitution. That is what the Constitution says. So even though I am not a huge fan of birthright citizenship, I understand that that is a foundation of our country. That is what our country was built on. That's how we function. And if you wanted to get it changed, you would have to propose a constitutional amendment. Instead, Trump tried to sign an executive order just ending it unilaterally on his own, which is obviously unconstitutional, and he obviously cannot do that legally. So, of course, it got challenged in courts, and of course, it's getting appealed all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the Trump administration knows that ending birthright citizenship with an executive order can't work. That's not how it would work. It's not legal. It's not constitutional. They would never be able to do it. And they know they would lose if that's what they tried to take to court. So instead, they're getting sneaky with it. And they're saying, okay, I don't even want to talk about whether or not we can end birthright citizenship. That's not even what I want to have the case about at all. I want to make the case that a judge in, for example, Pennsylvania, saying that this is unconstitutional and illegal, and so it can't take effect anywhere in this country, cannot affect, for example, Texas. Pennsylvania and Texas are in two completely different districts. You shouldn't be able to affect the Fifth Circuit in Texas with a Third Circuit judge. So on its face, I understand that that can seem pretty reasonable. And honestly, essentially every president ever has complained about judges doing national injunctions. And that's what that's called, by the way. When a judge in one area says, no, you're not allowed to do this, and you're not only not allowed to do this here, you're not allowed to do this anywhere in the country. That's a national injunction. Presidents have complained about that forever. Joe Biden complained about it. Barack Obama complained about it. George Bush complained about it. They don't like it because they want to be able to do what they want to do. And they don't think some judge should be able to stop them everywhere. Maybe some judge can stop them in one district, but they don't think they should be able to stop them everywhere. And I understand why that might be appealing. But there are two serious issues with that. The first is a little more minor. It's just the fact that if something truly is unconstitutional, then it shouldn't affect anybody anywhere. Birthright citizenship is in the Constitution. The Constitution applies to all persons within the United States, period. That's it. So, yeah, if a judge is saying this goes against the Constitution, okay, I want that to apply to everybody because I think the Constitution applies to everybody. But the second issue is more insidious because the problem is if you say that judges can no longer issue nationwide injunctions, then that means that federal laws, important laws, bedrocks of our country, like birthright citizenship, can be different from state to state. So what that's saying is conservatives, for example, are generally against birthright citizenship. They don't like it. Most of the time they understand it's embedded in the Constitution, so there's nothing they can do about it, but they don't like it. There are activist judges who do not necessarily care about the Constitution. They care about their own personal beliefs. And so if ending birthright citizenship is found to be legal in one state and illegal in another state, what that means is, theoretically, you could be a citizen of the United States in one state, cross a border, and all of a sudden not be a citizen anymore and be eligible to be deported, be detained. And this goes for any law, anywhere. If there's a state, think of a very red state, Alabama, for example, who just, they love Trump. They just want to do whatever Trump wants to do. And they don't really care if it's legal or not. And so no matter what happens, they're going to rule that Trump can do whatever he wants, no matter what. That means that they could enact any law they want at all. They could say if you are not born in Alabama, you're not considered a U.S. citizen, and so we're going to deport you to whatever country we want. They could say, we are suspending the writ of habeas corpus in Alabama, and we are going to detain you with no cause, and we're not going to let you have a trial by jury or see a courtroom. They could say anything. And if you have a completely different set of foundational constitutional laws between states, we are not a country anymore. We are a series of countries bound only by geography. This is disturbing in its implications. And the really frightening thing is the Supreme Court seems to be seriously considering this. And I know some of the examples I talked about are maybe you think they're alarmist. Maybe you think they're crazy. I'm telling you, a bunch of the stuff that the Trump administration has already done, I thought was just alarmist crazy talk. I never thought we would be deporting U.S. citizens. I never thought a sitting president would try and run a fake electors scheme. So I'm not putting anything past these guys. They have lost all benefit of the doubt. They have no limits. There is no low that they will not stoop to accomplish whatever goal they want. I think that's more than clear. Speaking of habeas corpus, our old buddy Stephen Miller, he had a little bit of a interesting interview. He said that we are considering suspending the great writ, the writ of habeas corpus. We don't want to do it, but we absolutely will do it if judges don't do the right thing. I think I've talked about this before, but basically habeas corpus is, here's the exact definition. It's a writ requiring a person under arrest to be brought before a judge or into court, especially to secure the person's release unless lawful grounds are shown for their detention. So it's basically saying you're not allowed to just lock somebody up indefinitely with no chance to defend themselves. You have to give them their day in court. You have to produce the body. That's what habeas corpus means. And it's called the Great Writ because it's one of the most important foundational rights that we have in America. Habeas corpus means you're not allowed to just disappear people. And it has been suspended before. It is suspended in war times, and it is a truly extreme measure. We suspended it during the Civil War, for example. And actually, Abraham Lincoln got into a lot of hot water because he tried to suspend it unilaterally. It ended up getting overturned, and he had to go to Congress to ask for it. We also suspended it during the World War, and we used it to inter Japanese American citizens and hold them in concentration camps. And that is still a black stain on our nation's history. So it's not just something you can joke around about. It's not something you take lightly. It's like somebody holding a loaded gun to your head and saying, if you don't act right, I'm going to pull the trigger. That's a serious problem. And Stephen Miller smugly going into an interview talking about suspending habeas corpus like it's just some thing the government can do if they decide they need to is heinous. It's horrible. It is horrific. And I've gotten into conversations with some commenters about what true tyranny really looks like. That is exactly what true tyranny really looks like. Not even just suspending habeas corpus and then abusing it. Even the threat to do so is tyrannical. The threat, because it means that people are going to think twice before speaking out. Because God forbid they actually somehow do suspend habeas corpus because they planted this nonsense idea that we're under an invasion from a street gang and they can get rid of anybody. I talked about the mayor of Newark before. How he got arrested, he went to court. Well, guess what? If they suspend habeas corpus, it could have ended at he got arrested. We don't know where he is now. That's it. Newark has no mayor. So, yeah, I've talked at length about my opinion on Stephen Miller. It's not improving by the day. I hope that people like him are held to account for their crimes when this is all over. And speaking of, there's just this absolutely ludicrous story that's going around right now. Former FBI Director James Comey posted a picture where he said, "Oh, look, I found some seashells on the beach." And the shells spelled out 8647. 8647. And any reasonable person would probably come to the conclusion that, hey, maybe that's about the impeachment proceedings that are starting against Trump right now, which I'm not even really covering in this episode because they're not going to go anywhere. But basically, Democrats were able to start some impeachment proceedings against the president. It's going to be voted down. It doesn't matter, but good for them. He deserves to be impeached. So Comey posted this 8647 thing, and MAGA went absolutely wild. The director of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, said that it was calling for Trump to be assassinated somehow. And the director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, agreed. And they have called for an investigation into James Comey, upstanding citizen, former FBI director, because they are pretending like they think he might have been calling for violence against Donald Trump. This is so ludicrous. This is an affront to any patriot, any American citizen that supports the First Amendment. I mean, this is an absolute slap in the face. And Republicans, MAGA, go on and on about, those snowflakes, Trump derangement syndrome. And then they can't even take some guy saying, yeah, we should 86 the president. Are you serious? 86, I have never heard anybody use the term 86 to mean kill. I have heard it mean get rid of. I think that's what everybody has heard it mean. That's where it originated. It's from 86ing an item on the menu of a restaurant. Getting rid of the menu item. That's ludicrous. It's genuinely embarrassing that these people with a straight face would go on TV and claim that this was any kind of a call for violence. I would be so embarrassed, really, to be a MAGA person right now. Okay. The final thing I want to talk about is a little more fringe, but I think it's really important. And I think it's really important to get the word out because this is something that I have not heard any reporting on whatsoever. So there are groups of people that thought that something fishy was going on with the 2024 election. And look, I will admit, I thought they were loonies. I thought they were absolutely crazy. I thought they were conspiracy theorists. Don't give them the time of day. It's has the potential to go the way of like January 6th and the election deniers and yada, yada, yada. But there has actually been some pretty compelling evidence that's been released. And I just want to talk with you about it a little bit. I want to get your perspective. So I'm going to kind of give a brief overview, just a few sentences on what they found. And then I actually want to just read you their executive summary. They released a massive report. It's like 54 pages. It's a lot. And then they released just like a one-page kind of executive summary on what each chapter is about and, you know, the most important findings. So I'm just going to read you that executive summary. But first of all, let me just go over what it is. So independent auditors looked over the numbers of specifically the election in Iowa. Iowa is interesting in particular because there was a really fantastic pollster, Ann Seltzer, who was really well known for just extremely accurate polling data. And when she polled Iowa before the 2024 election, it was like strongly in the Democrat territory. I think it was like plus 13% for Harris or something like crazy, like really, really strongly blue. And then when the results came, they just didn't match up with the polling at all. It wasn't even close. And so people kind of wanted to take a look. So independent auditors really looked over the numbers and they found some unusual discrepancies. And essentially, just the very brief overview is they found that there were some anomalies and some either like blatant incompetence or corruption that just can't easily be explained. And I'm going to post the link below too, because I want you to look it over if you're interested in it. It's really extensive. They did their homework on this, seriously. But basically, when they looked over the numbers on the counties that were like officially audited, most of those counties had like exact round numbers as the amount of votes tallied, which was just unusual. And there's a lot of strange going ons with like some of the voting machines and whether or not they're connected to the internet or like it's a lot. I'm going to read the executive summary in just a minute. That's going to be how I close out this video. If you have concerns about what may or may not have happened in the 2024 election, just listen. I'll read the executive summary. You can decide if you think it's legit or if you want to look into it anymore. If you think it's legit, spread the word. And especially if you live in Iowa. Nothing's going to happen unless people like really make a big deal about this because the election's done. It's over with. And I'm not even saying like, you know, overturn the election or whatever. I just want a serious audit to be done. In any free and fair democracy, that's what should happen. It's what happened when the Trump team ran all these lawsuits about the 2020 election. There were extensive investigations into exactly what happened. And that's all I'm asking for here. If the facts turn out to show that there was no foul play, okay, that's great. That's a good thing. But it deserves being looked into. Thank you very much for joining. In just a minute here, I'm going to read this executive summary, but in case you don't want to stay for that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Leave your thoughts below. I would really love to hear from you about, you know, whatever news segment caught your eye, or if there's anything that I didn't talk about that you're surprised that you would have liked to hear about. Let me know. I always love hearing from you guys. Otherwise, hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. I feel weird even saying that, but seriously, share this video around. If you like my stuff, I really appreciate it. It's so awesome hearing from you guys and, you know, seeing new viewers and stuff. I really love it. So thank you again for sticking around for this extra long episode. And here is that report. Chapter 1. On November 5th, 2024, Election Day, the Scott County Auditor publicly posted the precinct selected to be audited by the Iowa Secretary of State. This indicates a violation of Iowa's post-election audit laws, as precincts were not supposed to be selected until the day after the election. The Scott County Auditor later confirmed this precinct passed the post-election audit. Chapter 2. The results of the audited races at the selected precinct closely reflected the Scott County countywide results, while the unaudited race results differed significantly. The total votes received by members of the same party for the presidential and U.S. House representative races in Scott County were very similar among the audited ballots cast, which did not reflect countywide results. The Iowa Secretary of State's report listed exactly 31,000 total votes from registered Republicans in Scott County and 27,999 total votes from registered Democrats in 2024, which is a plus 7,200 net gain for Republicans since 2020. This report produced mathematical inconsistencies and irregularities, such as total votes from Democrats and independents comprised exactly 30.99% and 33.99% of total votes in Scott County, while votes from Republicans and, quote, missing votes, otherwise accounted for, comprised 35.02% of total votes. Another report from the Iowa Secretary of State indicated that the selected Scott County precinct listed many rounded numbers and extremely similar turnout rates for female and male voters of the same party and among all age groups, which suggests that those numbers may be artificial. Chapter 3. The former Scott County auditor resigned in part due to lack of support from the Scott County Board of Supervisors, whose Republican members allegedly violated Iowa's open meetings law to conspire to inappropriately appoint the current Scott County auditor. The previously inexperienced Scott County auditor has since been reprimanded by the Iowa Secretary of State multiple times for her mistakes. Yet, she won re-election by 8+ points while administering the 2024 general election. Chapter 4. The Iowa Secretary of State has repeatedly claimed there has never been a single error detected in any post-election audit since implemented in 2018, which is over 191,202 ballots. Studies have shown that the average error rate of similar optical scanners is roughly 0.4%, which refutes the Iowa Secretary of State's claim. Audit reports previously shared on the Iowa Secretary of State's website indicated that these audits were not being performed and/or reported accurately, and have since been altered or taken down. Regardless, Iowa's post-election audit process is flawed and ineffective. The Iowa Secretary of State's selected group of county auditors who help the Iowa Secretary of State administer elections across Iowa steadily shifted from equally bipartisan in 2018 to 100% Republican in 2023. All 10 of the 2023 members administered the 2024 general election in their jurisdictions. Both members who represented counties in the same congressional district as Scott County similarly used ES&S tabulators. Chapter 5. Cross-county comparisons of voting systems indicated that counties which used ES&S tabulators during the 2024 general election shifted significantly further in favor of the Republican presidential candidate relative to 2020 results when compared to counties which did not use ES&S equipment. This trend was reflected across all 4 of Iowa's congressional districts. 5 of the 16 counties which reported a net gain of at least 7.2% margin increase in favor of the Republican presidential candidate were located in District 1, 4 of which used ES&S tabulators. 4 counties reported changes in total votes by party registration that were extremely similar to Scott County. The 4 county auditors of these 4 counties were also members of the Iowa Secretary of State's Auditors Advisory Group. Jones County and Muscatine County results indicated further similarities and anomalies, such as extremely consistent voting patterns among females, males, and independents. And the total voters in Jones County was just one less than 2020 results, 11,030 versus 11,031. Results in other counties showed concerning anomalies as well. For example, exactly 8,000 total ballots cast in Harris County in 2024. Among Scott County precincts that were not redrawn between 2020 and 2024, those with fewer total ballots cast in 2024 correlated with disproportionately lower Democratic candidates' vote totals, while precincts with more total ballots cast indicated disproportionately higher vote totals for Republican candidates. This trend was observed in other counties as well. Chapter 6. The former Scott County auditor inexplicably purchased 80 extra backup flash drives for their DS200 scanners in 2017, which would have been available for use during the 2024 general election. The current Scott County auditor purchased replacement ES&S tabulators and a new e-poll book system ahead of the 2024 general election. The Iowa Secretary of State repeatedly claims that Iowa's tabulating equipment is not connected to the internet, but does not mention that ES&S voting systems have been used to electronically transmit results via cellular modems as instructed by state law. It's unclear which counties may have used cellular modems or if these modems were monitored. Election cybersecurity laws required third-party monitoring of election results data sent digitally to and from county auditors' offices. However, the network systems used in county auditors' offices and polling locations were less monitored and more vulnerable. In 2019, Lynn County Auditor Joel Miller publicly addressed concerning vulnerabilities in iVoters, which is Iowa's voter registration system. Miller filed a public records request regarding $1 million in allegedly misused HAVA funds allocated to the Iowa Secretary of State's office to improve and ultimately replace iVoters. However, iVoters is still being used today. And Chapter 7. The established legal channels to report these concerning findings inherently present immense conflicts of interest. The Iowa Secretary of State, the Iowa Attorney General, the Scott County Auditor, and the Scott County Sheriff are all members of the same political party and work closely with each other. Recent legislation passed by that same political party in 2021 states that willful election official misconduct, such as the actions described in this report, is now a Class D felony. Iowa Code Chapter 39A, which was also passed by the same party in 2023, states that the prosecution of election misconduct is the exclusive responsibility of the Iowa Attorney General, who would then be required to submit those findings to the Iowa Secretary of State and explain whether they will pursue charges. Therefore, the authority to investigate and prosecute election official misconduct has been conveniently consolidated under those who may have violated these laws. We conclude that Iowans across the state must now commit to a nonpartisan investigation of these concerns raised in this report, or otherwise risk losing our democracy. Thank you again, and remember, when you change your perspective, the reality changes. I'll see you soon.